Welcome to the MudRoom, our weekly free and live uncommon sense parenting class. How's everybody doing today? I have had quite the morning. I woke up this morning to my phone absolutely blowing up because of my Instagram DMs because somebody was trying to knock off my Instagram account, which I think means that I've made it. The world's most backhanded compliment. But that was stressful because they hadn't stolen any of my photos, but they'd stolen my photo. And they were using my name, and the handle was one letter different than my handle. My handle is @parentingposse, in case you want to go follow me. They had @parentingpose, so they just took an S out of posse. And they were DMing all of my followers with a financial scam. So I had tons of people blowing up my phone being like, is this you? What is going on? What is it about this bursary? Total bunk, by the way. Wasn't me. Thank you so much to Jennifer Singh of She's Newsworthy for kind of talking me through how to get that account taken down. It does appear to be resolved now, so yay. Thank you for everybody who reported it as spam. And Jennifer helped me figure out how to make contact with Instagram and get them to actually remove the account. So it seems to be resolved, but that basically took up my whole morning. Guys, it's not flattering when someone tries to steal your shit. But yeah, I think that means I've made it. If somebody's trying to spoof you, clearly you have something worth stealing, right? So I hope everybody's having a less stressful morning than I am. Before we get into our topic today, let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Allana Robinson. I'm a parenting coach for parents of toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergartners, and I help parents just like you understand why your children are misbehaving and how to fix it without yelling, shaming, or timeouts. I am your host here on the MudRoom. I also host the Parenting Posse Facebook group, hence my Instagram handle, and I host the Parentability program where I help parents raise well-behaved kids of their own. So, a lot of us are having to make some very tough choices about what to do about our child's care right now, or our children's care right now. Things are opening back up. In some places, they're closing back down because of case spikes. And I've been getting just tons of emails and DMs about how? How am I supposed to make this decision? I'm seeing posts in the Parenting Posse about it. Somebody just posted about it this morning. We've talked about it in Parentability. In every other parenting group I'm in, there are just tons of posts about it. So today, I thought that I would walk you through some of the factors that I think parents should be considering when making a decision about whether to send your children back into care, or to homeschool, or to virtual school, or send them to school, whatever your options are. I'm not going to tell you what to do though, because one, that's not my role as a coach. I'm not here to give you the answers. I'm here to support you through considering your own options and make a decision that you, at the very least, feel at peace with. Generally, I am all about, being 100% confident and excited about our decisions. I think that's a bit of a reach in this case, though. I think most of us are very firmly between a rock and a hard place, so we're just going to shoot for at peace here. So, hey everybody, if you're here, make sure you say hi. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know how you're feeling about all of this. If you're watching the replay, drop a replay in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to notifications so that you never miss a class. Okay, so let's start with the factors that we need to take into consideration when making a back to school decision in 2020. Because this year is unique. There's a lot of factors to consider, and no two families are going to be able to make the exact same decision. We're all hanging out in the same storm here, but we aren't all in the same boat. So what are we going to be evaluating? First, we're going to be talking about prevalence. How prevalent is the virus in your area right now? What are the projections of prevalence? What's the risk of transmission? Second, we're going to be talking about viability. So viability covers a lot. It covers finances, but it also covers logistics. Third, we're going to talk about health and safety. What measures and precautions are being put in place, if any? And finally, we're going to consider mental health and developmental health. Which of our options are going to keep us sane? Which of our options are developmentally appropriate for our kids? So, prevalence. How prevalent is the virus in your area right now? What are the projections? You're going to want to look at active cases published by your public health authority, obviously. How many cases there are currently, how many are resolved, and you're going to want to keep up with those numbers. Now, those numbers aren't complete. They're likely going to be at the very least a couple of days out of date, and they only represent people who've had severe enough symptoms to warrant getting tested. COVID doesn't seem to have like an MO. It seems to really affect some people to a horrific level, and then for other people it's like they have a sore throat and, a minor cough. So assume that those numbers are likely a bit higher than what the data actually shows. Why is this important? Because it gives you a good idea of how common it is in your area, what the risk of it being transmitted to you or to your child is. Obviously, the more dense your population, the higher your incidents are going to be. So this gives you a bit of a bead on how easy it would be to be exposed. In my area, personally, we currently have no active cases. Nobody's hospitalized. We've had, I think, under 50 cases total. So the prevalence in my area is pretty low. Second, I suggest looking at the viability of your options. As I said, this covers a lot. When you do this, do not go into it looking for the holes just yet. Okay? It is so easy, especially because these are decisions we don't want to be making. It's so easy to kind of go into how is this not going to work. That's not going to help you find your viable options. Okay? Don't go looking for the holes just yet. Go into this looking for how can we make this work, okay? The holes are going to make themselves very clear pretty quickly. But start by looking at your finances, the time you have available in the day, your schedules, your work flexibility, all of those things. The extra people that you have on your team. For those of you who have kiddos with special needs, you're going to be familiar with the concept of having a team. But for those who don't, you likely aren't. The people who are on your team are people who play a supporting role to you and your family and who are available to you and your family. So like personally, my husband and I have my parents on our team. They're able to provide some form of support. Both my parents are retired. My dad has offered to do some teaching for us, and so has my mom. My sister-in-law is a teacher. She's able to provide some form of support in the form of advice on schooling. She's on our team. Our babysitter is part of our team. She's been in our bubble. So whoever makes up your team is going to be very individual. And write down who is on your team and what kind of support they can give you. So like for us, My sister-in-law teaches in a city that's 2 hours away. She can't be like here providing childcare or tutoring. I wish, because they don't have any kids yet. But she can't. She's too far. But she can guide me on what subjects I need to teach my first grader. She can suggest resources for my kindergartner. She's more of a logistical support, whereas my sitter is more physical support. I can have her come over and care for my kids. I have a couple of my son's friends who have also been isolating to the same level that we have, and we've kind of been talking about, how could we maybe move the kids around so everybody gets a little bit of flexibility. They're on our team. They're part of our team. And in this section also goes your finances. How does this option or that option create or deplete finances? Can you afford it? And finally, look at logistics. Can you make this work with the hours that you have in your day? Who is going to do pickup and drop off? What are the requirements for pickup and drop off? Like, are you going to have to get like full on hazmat suit PPE'd to pick up your kid from daycare or to drop them off to daycare? How much time is that going to add to your day? And is it going to compromise your ability to get to work on time? Is that okay by your boss? Do you have the flexibility in your work to do all of these things at these times? Time is a huge factor, and I think many people are starting to come to realize that it's a very precious commodity. How much time is this going to take, and do I have that time available? Can I make that time available? If we drop something else, can that time, that freed up time, become available so that we can make this option that is in other ways more favorable work? So there's a lot of things. A lot of questions that need answering and that unfortunately aren't super clear answers. Third is health and safety. What precautions are being put in place at your daycare, at your school, at your workplaces? And are you comfortable with that given the prevalence that you've identified? If not, is there a way that you can take personal precautions? Like, is everybody able to strip down on the front porch, clothes go into a garbage bag, down into the washing machine, and everybody comes in, has a shower, and, that's how you're going to keep it out of your home? Or does having to take that level of precaution completely eliminate this option because it's completely untenable? This one really sucks because it has the potential to ruin an otherwise really viable option, but it's one of the few things that we actually have the most control over. And if you don't have the answer to this, start asking questions. Ask your school, ask your daycare, ask your babysitter, ask the people who are on your team. It's one of those things that we actually have a lot of control over, can make some of the biggest difference, but it also kind of sucks because it can also just completely ruin everything. And finally is health, mental health. Can you manage this option without feeling like you're walking a tightrope and that everything is one misstep away from going to hell in a handbasket? How long do you estimate that you can sustain this option comfortably? Okay, that might mean mental health wise, that might mean financially, that might mean logistically. What precautions could you put in place mental health wise that could make this option more sustainable? What support from your team would you need to make this option sustainable? And can they actually provide that? Right? You might consider somebody to be on your team, but when you actually check in with them, hey, can you provide me with this kind of support in September? They might be like, no, I don't have the spoons. So make sure that you check in with your team to make sure that who you consider on your team, they also consider to be on your team. And what is the backup option if this preferred option suddenly becomes no longer viable due to strain? Like, what happens if you have to pivot? And for our kids, which options are developmentally appropriate? What measures are reasonable? And do you feel that your child can reasonably cope with? How are the staff going to be handling it? Our children's mental health is really, really important, and we need to consider if, for instance, our daycare is suggesting that each child stay in a 6x6 box all day, what the effect of that on them is going to be, and is it worth it? Or like, if you have an infant, what spending 10 hours a day with adults who have half their faces covered could do for their social development? I'm not going to get into my specific concerns about, what the effects of these care situations are doing for a child's development this week. We'll talk about it again, maybe next week, maybe the week after. We'll talk about it soon. But it's something to start considering. And if you have specific scenarios that you're weighing, please consider taking it to the posse and we can kind of talk it out there. How I've been processing all of this information has been with a notepad of sticky notes. I have been using a different color for every option, and at the top I've been putting one question on each page and just kind of bullet pointing the answers that I have. And I've actually taken over like a whole wall in one of our hallways with this, and they're just like in columns. Because I'm both a very visual and a very kinetic learner, and I needed a place that I could physically organize my thoughts. If you're more of like a notebook person or a computer person, you might prefer to organize your thoughts in a binder or in a folder, or using a program like Notion or OneNote where you can create more running documents. There's no real right way to do this, but consider your learning style, and I really encourage you to actually write down what you're thinking, whether that's on the computer or physically writing it down. Often we can't see viable options until we have it down in black and white in front of us. It also makes it a lot easier to collaborate with our spouses or our co-parents or our sitters or anyone like that. Like, my husband can walk by my wall of Post-its and see the questions that I don't have answers to and start considering them on his own. And he can even go in with a pen and add his input without us necessarily having to sit down and have any huge discussions just yet. We will at some point have to sit down and decide what we're doing. But at that point, we should both have our input for each of those questions on the sticky notes, and we'll have a good idea of kind of where we stand. One of my big open questions for homeschooling was, who's going to teach my first grader math? I'm not good at math. Numbers make no sense to me beyond like basic addition and subtraction. As an adult, I started the process of getting diagnosed with dyscalculia because I just don't think that there's any other explanation for how bad I am with numbers. So if we choose to keep our boys home and homeschool them, I am not the person to be in charge of teaching math, even though I am the person who is going to be home with them because I work from home. And so, that was a big question for me, and that was on the wall. And then my dad offered to teach math, which is great, so we put that down. But we only see them a couple of times a month. So, under viability, that had dad can teach math, but will he do it over Zoom? Will he visit every weekend? How can we make that work? And then my husband walked by and added okay, if your dad can do it a couple times a month, then I can do it, in between. I can pick up that slack. Great. We can talk more about it when it's time to choose a lane and stick to it, but that's a point in the column for making homeschooling slightly more viable. So, what should you do? I have no idea. I don't know. Only you can make that decision. I don't even know what we're going to be doing yet. Every day new questions come up, and the viability columns are constantly changing. The mental health columns are constantly changing. Personally, I have to consider the military and the demands that it's putting on my family as well in all of those columns. What happens if my husband gets deployed suddenly? So there's many things to consider. Hey Jade, hey Erin, hey Alice, hey Teresa. Erin says she's feeling so conflicted. I know. I think everybody is between a rock and a hard place right now, and that's why I said, like, usually I'm all about, like, let's figure out how to make a decision that you are excited and confident in. But I think that's a bit of a reach right now. I don't think anybody is going to feel excited and confident about any of the options available to them. Teresa said, I would be okay with school if it was capped at 15 kids per class, but that's not the case here in Alberta. My daughter needs to go back to school, but I want the school plan to be sustainable for the whole year. I hear you. I think we have to also come to peace with the idea that the decision we make in September doesn't have to be permanent. Like, we can pivot. Jade says it sucks that a lot of the questions parents have are met with, we don't know, so I think for lots of us are sitting here in limbo. That's exactly how I felt, which is why I started putting questions on sticky notes, because I was also losing track of the number of questions that I had, right? Like, I'd think of something and be like, oh my gosh, I need to figure that out. But then 15 other questions would come in, and that question would kind of fall off the radar. So I started just writing them down and sticking them on the wall. That way, I see them, I get reminded of them, I get a chance to think on them, and when it comes to mind, I could just go to the wall and jot down any answers or fragments of answers that we have. Hey, Katrina. It says this whole situation gives me a headache. It does. Me too. It does me too. And speaking again to what Teresa said, we have to keep in mind that we're not chained to any one decision. If any of the large factors that you've made a decision on change, you can change your mind and switch tracks, right? And that's probably a good line item to put down too. How easily can I implement this or change course from this, right? How easy is it to pivot? For those with kids in school, look into their policies and how hard it is for you to pull them out if you put them in right now. Or how easy is it to say, okay, some risk factors have changed here. We've seen a spike in cases. I was okay with my kids being in school under these circumstances. Those circumstances have changed, and now I want to pull them out and do virtual schooling or homeschooling. How hard is that going to be to switch? Or if you have kids in daycare, how much notice do you need to give them that you've changed your mind? And will your spot be held? Amy says, thanks for this. Like everyone else, I'm so conflicted, and we're just at the preschool level. I know. I think right now, one of the hardest places to be is people who have kids in grade school, because there's this concept that, my gosh, if they don't get every single step in every single grade, they're just going to fail, and that's just not the case. People fail at things well into their 40s and still end up being very successful. So I think we kind of have to put that in perspective a little bit. When it's preschool and daycare and our kids are really little, I want everybody to just kind of let go of the learning concerns and try to focus more on the mental health and development and viability aspects. Because if something is going to be detrimental to their development, but it works for your finances and it's viable long term, is that a trade-off you want to make? Again, I can't tell you what to do. That's a decision that you have to weigh and figure out where your comfort spot is, because everybody is going to be different. Even people who, like, my neighbors are not going to make the same decision for their kids who are the same age as my kids as we are, because, they have different bubbles. They have different, they don't have different employment. We live next to a base in the middle of nowhere, so basically everyone around here is employed by the military. But they have different financial concerns, they have different responsibilities. So, two families are not going to be able to make the same decision. Alice says she's not so concerned about academics, but she's concerned about socialization. Yeah, socialization. And again, it's hard. Like, for me, socialization is not a huge concern for me because my boys have each other. And as much as it sucks that they only have each other, and I'm sure they would enjoy spending time with a few more people, and we're starting to consider them spending some time with a few more people because, as I said, we have 0 cases. We haven't for a while. We've had less than 50 cases total in our area. So we're starting to like feel that out and be like, okay, who could we start socializing with? For me, it's pretty low on the totem pole in the list of concerns just because my boys have each other. They get along well. They're not lonely. But for a family that has a solo child, that might be really high up on your list of concerns, right? Everybody's priorities are going to be different. I wish I had an answer for you. And it changes too. Like, is socialization a really high priority when there's very low prevalence? But as the prevalence goes up, does the socialization concern go down? I wish I had more answers for you. One thing that I will say to consider is that we often tend to think of socialization as children socializing with each other. And that's not the case. I mean, yes, children like to play with each other and they like to hang out with each other, but children get socialization from adults too. Children get socialization from, talking to your neighbor over the fence. They get socialization from hanging out with grandma and grandpa. They get socialization from hanging out with their older cousins. Don't get too wrapped up in socialization being socialization with children in the same age range as them. I could go on a whole thing about socialization and this kind of bias we have towards same-age peer socialization, but I won't right now because we'll be here for hours. Marilee says her son is supposed to start kindergarten and the school just let us know that we have to do virtual learning only. I'm concerned about the level of screen time as well as his attention span. Kindergarten to me falls into the preschool category where I would just be like, nope, my oldest son just finished kindergarten. My youngest son is supposed to be going into kindergarten. If the only option for them to participate in school is virtual learning, I'm not sure that I'm going to bother. I think we're just going to skip kindergarten in that sense. As much as it breaks my heart, and I would love him to have that kindergarten experience that my older one got. Again, I don't think academics should be a factor in kindergarten. And I know that in the US, it's become this big factor. Is it a good thing that we have a chance to push back against that? See, like, it's just this, the decisions roll into a snowball, and suddenly at some point it feels like the snowball is rolling down a hill away from you faster than you can keep up, which is why I really like to write all this stuff down. Hey, Tarek. Liz says, ask a homeschooler for suggestions on socializing. Many have had to come up with plans for their children outside of public school long before this. That is true, Liz, but a lot of those involve hanging out with people that aren't in your bubble, right? Like, and a lot of, we really considered homeschooling just from the get-go. And a lot of the socialization options involve swimming lessons, team sports, beavers, Girl Guides, all these group activities that, are they safe right now? Are they not safe right now? It's kind of the same considerations as school and daycare, right? So, and again, it might be totally safe in an area like we are where there are no cases in our entire county. We live in a very large rural county, so for there to be 0 cases in our entire county is a pretty large area to have 0 cases in. So it might be totally safe here for our kids to be, starting swimming lessons and going to beavers and participating in team sports, it might not be in a more densely populated area. It might not be in an area with a higher prevalence. So again, it's that snowball. Katrina says, we have 2 households trying to make a decision for the same 2 kids. It just adds another level of complication. I want their mental health to be a priority for our school board. Yeah, families who are trying to coordinate, who, like, it's hard enough making a decision with, mom and dad. When you add in mom, dad, and their respective partners, and their own concerns, right? It's just, the list gets longer, which is again why I like using sticky notes, like this. I have a pad right here. This is one of my pads. These ones, this one has my dinner order on it, but I like using these ones because they give me lots of space. I don't like using the little square ones because it just doesn't give me enough room to like list everything out. But I try and put like my question at the top and then all this, and then I wish I could take you guys out into my hallway, but the rig won't move. I've got just a huge wall in our hallway. I took all the pictures off of it, and I've just been using it as like my personal pin board, my personal sticky note station, just because I need to be able to see everything, and color coding it has really helped my brain kind of organize things. Jay says she's previously homeschooled for years and will be taking this on again as it's worked in the past. She's kind of excited about it. Awesome. She worries about her older kids' mental health and being left behind by their friends who are moving on or visiting them, or her visiting them. Yeah, it's, again, right? Like, it's that socialization piece, and different families have different comfort levels and different factors. Like, my family, the reason that we've held off on socializing my boys with so many other kids for so long is my mom's a cancer survivor, and she, she's cured, she's in remission, but I don't want to, she's been through chemo, she's been through radiation, and I don't want to introduce anything to her that would potentially attack her already weakened immune system. And my mother is a big factor in my children's lives, whereas another family, if they don't have anybody with any, immunocompromised people, and or those people don't play a huge factor or role in their child's lives, their priorities are going to be different. So it's really, really hard, especially explaining it to older kids, that not everybody's priorities are the same. Not everybody else's considerations are the same. Megan, we have home educated our boys right from the start. No nursery, preschool, etc. We're always asked about socialization. It's not just about having friends to play with. They get it from everywhere. Our boys are so confident when they interact with all ages every day. Exactly. And that's what I was getting at with the whole, kids don't just need to hang out with kids. That's nice. And it's great, and they enjoy it, and I'm not discounting it in any way, shape, or form. But kids don't just socialize with kids. Socialization just literally means interacting with other human beings. What I'm really concerned about, and we're going to talk about this more later because otherwise, as I said, we'll be here for hours. And this is already a longer episode, but what I'm really more concerned about is children, particularly children under 3, going into care situations where their peers and the adults all have their faces covered from the nose down all day long, because that's a really sensitive period for learning joint attention and for learning body language and learning how to read people's facial expressions. And if those facial expressions are covered from the nose down, then it's going to be really difficult for them to learn that. And I think we're going to start seeing children who have a lot of social communication difficulties, which we typically reserve as, something that children primarily on the autism spectrum deal with. But I think we're going to start seeing that kind of style of social communication difficulties in completely typical children, just because everybody's, and I mean, it's necessary. I'm not saying don't wear a mask. Masks are definitely necessary, but I'm concerned about what the effect is going to be on really little kids. Virginia says, suggestions to explain to your child why are you choosing to homeschool when they know their other peers are going to school without making them think their friends are in an unsafe place. I usually just use a social story for stuff like that, and I use very simple language, and it's just like, hey, so because of the virus and because Nana is a cancer survivor, which means that her immune system isn't working well, we've decided that we're going to stay at home because if you go to school, then you can't see Nana. And just kind of try and boil it down to the basics. And why I like putting it in a social story is because it's easy for you to review and to tell them the exact same thing over and over and over again. Children need repetition in order to understand. So by putting it in a social story, it's easy for you to repeat without having to like use all your energy trying to remember what you said last time. And it's easy for them to review once they've heard the story a few times. They can go and look at it and they can kind of think through it in their own time. So it's a really useful tool. Hey, Jenny. Jenny says, we have no idea what is going on or how everything will unfold. We did not feel that we were good at homeschooling and are struggling with what might happen over the next year if that's what we need to do. I know. I'm not a particularly confident homeschooler either. As I said, like math, I should not be teaching anyone math. And which is why I found consulting with my friends who are teachers in our local school system really helpful. And I think it's worth, if you don't have any friends who are educators in your local area, calling up your school and asking to speak to a teacher in your child's grade or program. Because like something that I got told by several friends who are teachers was, you need to focus on reading, math, spelling, and if French is important to you, French. And they were like, all the science and the social studies and all that stuff is fairly easy to catch up on, and it's taught at such a basic level in grade 1 that we're just not that concerned about it. But if they can't read, they can't, spell their basic sight words, and they can't do basic math, that's going to be difficult to catch up on. So that helped me kind of narrow my focus down, because that way I know, okay, shit hits the fan and I have to figure this out all on my own. Now I have 4 subjects, reading, writing, math, and French, that I have to figure out. But I don't have to get so overwhelmed by all the aspects of all the others. So I think talking to a teacher about like, okay, what is going to make the difference if my child misses it versus not in your particular curriculum in your area is a good thing to do too. And those people are on your team. Andrea, I work at a public library, and for those of you thinking you might be homeschooling, just let me say, talk to your local library, get staff ordering books and other resources that can help you in September. Yes, use your resources. Excellent. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful, and gave you some ideas of how to make a decision that you can at least feel at peace with. If you want to chat about it more, let's continue the conversation in the Parenting Posse. The link is in the description of the video. I just ask that when we're discussing these things in the Posse, that you frame your question as, what factors are you considering for X? Or how are you making Y work? Versus, are you sending your kid back or not? Because that's too general, and you should not be basing your decisions for your child based off of what other people who live all over the world are doing or are not doing. So keep your questions on options and factors and perspectives versus decisions. Okay, that's all I ask. That's it for today. Have a great rest of your week and end of your month. I will see you next week for another Uncommon Sense Parenting class. Bye.